Serena Blackwell stared at the torn pieces of an ultrasound scattered across her flower shop counter, evidence of a secret she'd just destroyed. 6 weeks pregnant by a man she'd never see again. Or so she thought. Because the next morning, that same man's face filled every news channel. Nico Valente, Mafia heir, announcing his wedding to end a blood war. The stranger from the thunderstorm wasn't just anyone. He was everything she couldn't have. And now she carried his child. A secret that could shatter an empire or save it. Want to see how this impossible love story unfolds? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. Stood behind the counter of Wildflower and stood behind the counter of Wildflower and Thorn, her small flower shop tucked between a bodega and a dry cleaner, watching water stream down the windows like the city itself was weeping. It was past closing time, nearly 9 o'clock, but she'd stayed late to finish arrangements for a corporate event. Her hands moved with practiced precision, trimming stems, adjusting baby's breath, creating beauty from chaos. It was what she'd always done, what she'd had to do, ever since her parents died when she was 19, leaving her with nothing but this shop and the stubborn determination to make it survive. The bell above the door chimed. Serena looked up, ready to apologize that they were closed, and the words died in her throat. The man who stepped inside was drenched. Water dripped from his dark hair, his expensive suit clinging to broad shoulders. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped her breath. It was the way he looked at her, like he'd been searching for something and had finally, unexpectedly, found it. "We're closed," she managed, though her voice came out softer than she'd intended. "I know." His voice was deep, rough around the edges, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. "I saw your light on. I need flowers." At 9 o'clock at night? In a thunderstorm? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. It transformed him from intimidating to devastating. Exactly at 9 o'clock at night, in a thunderstorm. Something about the way he said it, with a hint of self-deprecating awareness, made her relax slightly. She'd dealt with enough demanding customers to recognize when someone was being deliberately difficult. This wasn't that. This was something else. Something honest. "What's the occasion?" she asked, moving toward the cooler where she kept her pre-made arrangements. "Does there need to be one? Usually people don't brave weather like this for flowers without a reason." He stepped closer, leaving puddles on her worn wooden floor. Up close, she could see details the dim lighting had hidden. A scar along his jawline, eyes so dark they looked black in the shop's golden glow, and something in his expression that felt like recognition, though they'd never met. "Maybe I just wanted to see if anyone else was still awake in this city. Still working. Still here." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she didn't fully understand. Serena found herself studying him more carefully. The suit, despite being soaked, was clearly custom-made. The watch on his wrist probably cost more than her monthly rent, but his eyes held something that money couldn't buy or fake. A bone-deep weariness that matched her own. "Roses," he said finally. "Red ones, a dozen. Classic choice. Is that a criticism?" "An observation." She pulled out a dozen long-stemmed roses, their petals perfect, deep crimson against dark green stems. "Roses say what words sometimes can't. And what's that?" She met his gaze directly. "Depends on who's giving them and why." For a long moment, he just looked at her. The rain hammered against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, and the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. "These aren't for anyone," he said quietly. "They're for tonight, for this moment, for a stranger who's still here when the rest of the world has gone dark." Serena's hand stilled on the wrapping paper. She should have found the comment strange, maybe even concerning. Instead, it resonated with something deep inside her, the loneliness she carried like a second skin, the exhaustion of always being strong, always being alone. $15, she said, though her voice had gone soft. He pulled out his wallet, and she saw the corner of what looked like a black card, the kind that had no limit, but he handed her a 20 and shook his head when she reached for change. "Keep it. That's a 33% tip for wrapping flowers. Consider it payment for staying open when you should have gone home hours ago." She finished wrapping the roses in brown paper, tying them with twine, and handed them across the counter. Their fingers brushed, just for a second, but she felt it like an electric current. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Every instinct told her this was a moment that mattered, a crossroads where her answer would mean something more than simple politeness. "Serena." "Serena," he repeated, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "Thank you, Serena." "You're welcome." "Nico." He turned toward the door, roses in hand, and she thought that would be it. A strange, beautiful moment that would fade into memory. But he paused with his hand on the handle, looking back over his shoulder. "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." That almost smile again. "Do you believe in moments that change everything? Single choices that redirect your entire life?" The question was so unexpected, so raw, that Serena answered with complete honesty. "I think we tell ourselves that to make sense of chaos. But really, life is just a series of small decisions that add up. That's a lonely way to see the world." "Maybe, but it's honest." He nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Thank you for the honesty, Serena, and the roses." Then he was gone, disappearing into the storm like he'd never been there at all. Serena stood in the empty shop, staring at the puddles he'd left behind, the $20 bill still in her hand. She waited for the moment to pass, for her heartbeat to return to normal, for the strange electricity in the air to dissipate. It didn't. That night, she locked up the shop and walked home through rain that had softened to a drizzle. Her apartment was above a Korean restaurant, small and spare, but it was hers. She made tea she didn't drink and sat by the window watching the city lights blur through water-streaked glass. She thought about the man, Nico, and the way he'd looked at her, like she was the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. She thought about his words, moments that change everything, and she told herself to forget it. Forget him. Forget the way his voice had wrapped around her name. But 3 weeks later, when the thunderstorms returned, she found herself staying late at the shop again, waiting, hoping. He didn't come back. Life continued in its relentless pattern. Orders came in, arrangements went out. She paid her bills, kept her small business alive through sheer will and careful budgeting, and tried not to think about dark eyes and questions about fate. Until one morning, 6 weeks after that rain-soaked night, when everything changed. Serena woke feeling wrong. Not sick, exactly, but off in a way she couldn't define. By the time she'd showered and dressed, nausea hit hard enough that she barely made it to the bathroom. When it passed, she stood gripping the sink, staring at her reflection. Her period was late. 3 weeks late. The pharmacy test confirmed what her body already knew. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. Serena sat on the closed toilet lid, holding the plastic stick with shaking hands, and did the math. 6 weeks would put conception right around that night. That storm. One night. One moment of weakness when the rain finally stopped and she'd found herself walking toward a hotel bar instead of home. One stranger with kind eyes who'd bought her a drink, who'd made her laugh for the first time in months, who'd asked if she wanted to pretend, just for a few hours, that they were different people living different lives. One night when she'd said yes, she'd never even gotten his last name. The clinic appointment 3 days later confirmed everything. 6 weeks. Healthy. Due in late December. The technician printed out an ultrasound image. Barely more than a blur, a tiny spot on the screen that was somehow a life, a future, a completely impossible situation. Serena walked out of the clinic in a daze, the ultrasound photo clutched in her hand. She made it 2 blocks before she had to stop, leaning against a brick wall, trying to breathe through the panic. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Alone. Just like she did everything else. The father was a stranger from a one-night stand she'd never see again. She didn't have his number, didn't know his last name, couldn't find him even if she wanted to. And what would she say if she could? Remember that night we pretended to be different people? Well, surprise, you're going to be a father. No. This was her burden to carry, her choice to make, her life to rebuild. Again. She made it back to the shop and unlocked the door with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The space welcomed her with familiar scents, roses, eucalyptus, the rich earth smell of potting soil. She set her bag down, pulled out the ultrasound photo, and stared at it. This tiny blur would change everything, would demand everything. She'd have to figure out how to run a business while pregnant, how to afford medical care without insurance, how to prepare for a baby when she could barely afford to feed herself some months. The smart thing would be to consider all her options, to make a choice based on logic and financial reality. But as Serena looked at that grainy image, she felt something fierce and protective bloom in her chest. This baby wasn't planned. The father was gone. The future was terrifying. But this was hers. She tore the ultrasound photo into pieces, small, deliberate tears until it was confetti scattered across her counter. If she couldn't see it, maybe it wouldn't feel so overwhelmingly real. Maybe she could pretend just a little longer that her life wasn't about to implode. The bell above the door chimed. "Sorry, we're—" Serena looked up and froze. A woman in her 50s stood in the doorway, elegant in the way that spoke of old money and older secrets. Her hair was steel gray, perfectly styled, and her eyes were sharp as they took in every detail of the shop. "Serena Blackwell?" "Yes?" "My name is Maria Russo. I'm here to discuss the wedding flowers for my daughter's ceremony. The event is in 2 days, and our previous florist had a family emergency. We were told you're the best in the city for last-minute arrangements." Serena's mind raced. A wedding in 2 days was nearly impossible, especially one that clearly came from money. But the income would cover her rent for 3 months, maybe 4 if she was careful. "I can certainly try. What did you have in mind?" Maria stepped forward, pulling out a folder thick with photos and notes. As she spread them across the counter, directly over the torn pieces of ultrasound photo, Serena's brain cataloged details with professional precision. White roses, lots of them. Orchids for the bridal bouquet, minimalist arrangements for the tables. Everything crisp, elegant, expensive. "This is beautiful," Serena said honestly. "But may I ask, why come to a small shop like mine for something this elaborate? You could have any florist in the city." Maria's eyes met hers, and something flickered in their depths. Assessment, maybe, or warning. "Because this wedding needs to be perfect. It's not just a marriage, it's a merger. 2 families coming together to end decades of disagreement. My daughter Isabella is marrying Nico Valente. Perhaps you've heard of the family?" The name hit Serena like a physical blow. Nico Valente. The stranger from the storm. The man with roses and questions about moments that change everything. The father of the child growing inside her was getting married in 2 days. "Miss Blackwell?" Maria's voice cut through the roaring in Serena's ears. "Are you all right? You've gone quite pale." "I'm fine." The lie came automatically. "Just surprised by the timeline. You said the wedding is in 2 days?" "Saturday evening, St. Patrick's Cathedral. 800 guests. The mayor will attend. It's been planned for months, but our florist was in a car accident yesterday." Maria's expression softened slightly. "I know it's an enormous ask, but money is no object, and I'm told you're a miracle worker when it comes to flowers." Serena looked down at the spread of photos, her mind spinning. Somewhere in that folder was probably a picture of the bride, of Nico standing beside her, smiling, playing his role in this merger masquerading as marriage. She thought about this man who'd come to her shop in the rain, who'd bought roses for a moment, for a stranger, who'd asked about fate and choices. Had he known then? Had he been getting married even while standing in her shop, looking at her like she mattered? And that night at the hotel bar, the night that had resulted in the tiny life she'd just torn into pieces. Had he known then too? Had she been nothing more than a last taste of freedom before he chained himself to duty and dynasty? "I'll do it," Serena heard herself say. Maria's relief was palpable. "Wonderful, truly wonderful. Here's my card. Call me this evening with a quote. Whatever you need, we'll provide. This wedding must be perfect." After Maria left, Serena stood among the scattered ultrasound pieces and wedding photos, understanding with crystal clarity that she'd just agreed to create the flowers for the wedding of her baby's father. A wedding he was entering to end a blood war. A wedding she had no right to disrupt. She gathered the torn ultrasound photo and threw it in the trash. Then she spread out Maria's notes and got to work. Because this was what she did. She created beauty from chaos, order from broken pieces. And she survived. Always survived. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of stems and wire, ribbon, and prayer. Serena worked through the night, transforming her small shop into an assembly line of wedding flowers. White roses arrived by the hundreds. Orchids came in refrigerated trucks. Her small space overflowed with blooms that would celebrate a union between two people she'd never met. Except she had met one of them, hadn't she? Had felt his fingers brush hers. Had heard him ask about moments that change everything. By Friday evening, every arrangement was ready. The bridal bouquet was a masterpiece, white orchids and roses bound with cream ribbon, elegant and timeless. Serena held it in her hands and thought about the woman who would carry it. Isabella Russo, the daughter of old money and older violence, the bride who would end a war, the woman Nico had chosen, or who had been chosen for him. Serena set the bouquet down carefully, her hand drifting unconsciously to her still flat stomach. In there, invisible and impossible, was another choice, another secret, another life that connected her to a man she was supposed to forget. She should tell him. The thought appeared unbidden, and she shoved it away violently. Tell him what? That a one-night stand had consequences? That would accomplish nothing except destroying the peace this wedding was meant to create. She would be the chaos that undid years of negotiation, the scandal that reignited war. No, she would finish the job, take her payment, and disappear into her quiet life. The baby would be hers alone. Some secrets were kindnesses. Saturday morning arrived cold and gray. Serena loaded the flowers into a rented van and drove to St. Patrick's Cathedral, where an army of wedding planners descended like locusts, directing traffic with military precision. She carried arrangement after arrangement into the massive stone church, placing centerpieces along pews, flanking the altar with towers of white roses, creating an atmosphere of pristine, controlled beauty. She was adjusting the final arrangement when she heard it. His voice. "No, I understand. Yes, everything is prepared." Serena's hands froze on the flowers. She turned slowly, and there he was, 50 feet away, surrounded by men in expensive suits talking on his phone. Nico Valente, the stranger from the storm. Except he wasn't a stranger anymore. He was the heir she'd read about in the papers. The man whose wedding would be tomorrow's headline. The father of her child. He looked different in daylight, harder somehow, the weariness she'd glimpsed replaced by something more dangerous. This was a man who commanded rooms, who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives, who carried the weight of family legacy on his shoulders. This was not a man who bought roses in thunderstorms. As if sensing her gaze, Nico looked up. Their eyes met across the cathedral's vast space, and the world stopped. Recognition hit his face like lightning. Serena saw the moment he placed her, the flower shop, the rain, the roses. She watched understanding transform into confusion, then something that might have been hope before his expression shuddered completely. He said something to the men around him and started walking toward her. Serena's heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't do this. Couldn't stand here and pretend everything was normal while her entire life was a lie constructed around the secret growing inside her. She grabbed her bag and headed for the side door, moving fast but not running. Never running. That would draw attention. "Serena." Her name and his voice stopped her. She turned and he was there, closer than she'd expected, close enough that she could smell his cologne, different from that rainy night, more expensive, more controlled. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said quietly. "Last-minute florist. Your future mother-in-law hired me." Something flickered across his face at the words future mother-in-law, but his voice remained steady. "The flowers are beautiful." "They should be. They cost enough." A ghost of that almost smile. Still honest, I wondered if I'd imagined that. "You should get back to your wedding preparations." "Serena, congratulations, by the way." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "I hope you'll be very happy." She turned to leave again, and his hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "Wait, please." "There's nothing to wait for. You're getting married tomorrow. I'm just the florist." "You're not just anything." His voice dropped lower, intense in a way that made her breath catch. "That night was a mistake." She pulled her hand free. "For both of us. Let it go." "I haven't been able to." The honesty in his voice nearly broke her. Serena forced herself to meet his eyes, to see the truth there. He'd thought about her too. Remembered, regretted. But regret changed nothing. Your bride is probably looking for you, she said softly, and I have a business to run. This time when she walked away, he didn't follow. Serena made it to the van before the tears came. She sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, and let herself break just a little, just enough to release the pressure building in her chest. Then she drove home, unloaded the empty containers, and opened her laptop to check the news. The headline stopped her heart. Valente Russo wedding tomorrow. Historic union to end decades of violence. Below it, a photo of Nico in a tuxedo standing beside a beautiful woman with dark hair and darker eyes. Isabella Russo, his bride, his future. Serena slammed the laptop closed and walked to the bathroom. The trash can still held the torn pieces of ultrasound photo. She knelt and carefully gathered every scrap, laying them out on the floor like a puzzle. Slowly, painstakingly, she fit them back together. There, that tiny blur, that impossible secret, that choice she'd made when she decided to tear it apart, to hide, to protect, to carry this alone. The smart thing would be to throw it away again, to let Nico have his wedding, his peace, his dynasty, to raise this baby in quiet anonymity. But as Serena stared at the reconstructed image, she thought about what he'd asked her that rainy night. Do you believe in moments that change everything? She'd said no. Said life was just small decisions adding up. She'd been wrong. Some moments did change everything, and this tiny blur of life, was one of them. Serena carefully tucked the ultrasound pieces into an envelope and placed it in her bag. Then she went to her closet and pulled out the one dress nice enough for a cathedral wedding. Tomorrow, Nico Valente would marry Isabella Russo in front of 800 guests and end a blood war, unless she stopped it. The thought terrified and electrified her in equal measure. She had no plan, no strategy, no idea what she'd even say. She just knew that she'd spent her entire adult life being silent, being strong, being alone. And she was done. This baby deserved a father who knew it existed. Nico deserved to make an informed choice. And she deserved, finally, to stop protecting everyone else at the cost of her own truth. Serena set her alarm for early morning and tried to sleep. She failed. Sunday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, as if the world itself was celebrating the union. Serena dressed carefully. The simple navy dress, modest heels, her hair pulled back. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who didn't belong in this world of power and politics. But she went anyway. The cathedral was already filling when she arrived. She slipped into a pew near the back, anonymous among hundreds of guests, and watched the ritual unfold. The priest taking his position. The groomsmen filing in, the bridesmaids in pale pink, and then Nico walking down the aisle with his father, an older man who radiated danger the way some men radiated warmth. Serena's hand drifted to her stomach. That man was this baby's grandfather. The thought was surreal. The music swelled. Everyone stood. Isabella appeared at the cathedral entrance, a vision in white lace and pearls, her father beside her. This was it. The moment. The point of no return. Serena stood, her heart thundering, and opened her mouth to... She didn't know. Didn't have words prepared. Didn't have anything except truth and terror in equal measure. But before she could speak, before she could shatter the careful peace, something happened. Nico turned. His eyes swept the crowd, searching, desperate, and found her. And in that moment, Serena understood. He already knew. Somehow, impossible as it seemed, he knew. Their eyes held across the crowded cathedral, and in his gaze she saw everything: recognition, desperation, and a question he couldn't ask aloud. The music reached its crescendo. Isabella took another step, and Serena made her choice. She shook her head. Just once, a tiny movement that said, "Not like this, not here." Relief and anguish crossed Nico's face in equal measure. He turned back to the altar as Isabella reached him, took her hand, and spoke his vows like a man sentencing himself to life in prison. Serena left before the ceremony ended, slipping out into morning sunshine that felt cruel in its brightness. She'd made her choice, to protect his peace, to spare them both the scandal, but as she walked toward the subway, her phone buzzed. "Unknown number? Don't run. Please. I'm coming." Her hand shook as she typed back. "You just got married." "Unknown. I'll explain everything. Where are you?" She almost didn't answer, almost let this moment pass, let him return to his bride and his duty. Instead, she sent her address. Because maybe, just maybe, some moments really did change everything. And this one wasn't finished yet. Serena stood in her apartment staring at her phone, at the message that had just upended what little remained of her carefully constructed denial. I'm coming. 2 words from a man who'd just married someone else. 2 words that promised everything and threatened to destroy her fragile equilibrium. She should have said no, should have blocked the number, locked her door, disappeared into the anonymity that had protected her for so long. Instead, she looked around her small apartment with new eyes, seeing it as he would see it. The worn furniture she'd bought secondhand. The kitchen barely big enough for one person. The water stain on the ceiling from the restaurant below. This was her life, stripped of pretense, and in less than an hour, Nico Valente would walk into it. Her hands were shaking. Serena pressed her palms flat against the counter, forcing herself to breathe. She'd made the choice to text him her address. She couldn't unmake it now, couldn't pretend she didn't want answers as badly as he seemed to want to give them. The intercom buzzed 43 minutes later. She pressed the button without speaking, heard the street door unlock, and counted his footsteps on the stairs. 3rd floor. No elevator. Each step bringing him closer to a truth she'd tried so hard to bury. Then he was there, standing in her doorway, and the sight of him stole her breath all over again. He changed from his tuxedo into jeans and a dark sweater, but he still looked out of place in her shabby hallway. Too polished, too dangerous, too everything she'd told herself to avoid. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes held a wildness she hadn't seen before. You came, she said, because someone had to speak. You asked me to. I sent you an address. That's not the same as asking. Serena. He stepped forward and she stepped back, maintaining distance like a shield. You just got married. Shouldn't you be on your way to a reception, cutting cake, dancing with your bride? Something twisted in his expression. But there's no reception, no bride, not anymore. The words hung between them, impossible and terrifying. What are you talking about? Nico closed the door behind him, and suddenly her small apartment felt microscopic. Can I sit down? This is going to take a while to explain. She gestured toward the worn couch, and he sat like a man carrying the weight of the world. Serena remained standing, arms crossed, maintaining every possible barrier. Start talking. He looked up at her, and the rawness in his gaze nearly undid her. I didn't marry Isabella. The ceremony happened, yes, the vows were spoken. But the moment it was over, before we even left the cathedral, I told her the truth. What truth? That I couldn't do it, couldn't pretend, couldn't build a life on a lie when the only woman I've thought about for the past 6 weeks was standing in the back of the church looking at me like her heart was breaking. Serena's breath caught. You saw me. Of course I saw you. I've been looking for you everywhere. He stood, closing the distance between them with 2 steps. After that night at your shop? After the hotel? I tried to find you. Went back to the flower shop 3 times, but you were never there. Started to think I'd imagined the whole thing, that you were just a dream I'd conjured to escape reality. You were engaged, she whispered, the whole time. You were promised to someone else. An arrangement. A business merger dressed up as marriage. His jaw tightened. I've known Isabella since we were children. She's a good person trapped in the same cage I'm trapped in. 2 families using their children as bargaining chips to end a war neither of us started. That doesn't make it better. That night at the hotel, you let me think... I know. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and regret warring in his voice. I know what I did. That night, I was supposed to be at a family dinner finalizing wedding details. Instead, I walked into a bar and saw you sitting there alone. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. So you lied. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you the whole truth. That night, I wasn't Nico Valente, heir to a crime family. I was just a man who wanted one night where choices were his own, where he could talk to a woman who saw him, not his last name. Serena felt tears burning behind her eyes. You don't get to do that. You don't get to rewrite what happened into something romantic when you were using me as an escape from your real life. You're right. He took a step back, giving her space. You're absolutely right. What I did was selfish, reckless, wrong, and I've been paying for it every day since. Paying for it? The words came out sharp. You have no idea what paying for it looks like. Then tell me. His voice dropped, intense and urgent. Tell me why you were at the cathedral today. Tell me why you looked at me like you were drowning. Tell me. He paused, something shifting in his expression. Tell me why you're protecting your stomach like that. Serena's hand had drifted unconsciously to her abdomen. She snatched it away too quickly, and understanding crashed across his face like a wave. No, he breathed. No, that's not. You can't be. I can be. I am. The words came out defiant. 6 weeks, due in December. And before you ask, yes, it's yours. There hasn't been anyone else. Nico sat down hard like his legs had stopped working. For a long moment, he just stared at her, processing, calculating, understanding blooming in his expression. That's why you were at the cathedral, he said finally. You were going to tell me. I was going to, I don't know what I was going to do. Stand up and object, cause a scene, ruin your peace treaty? She laughed, bitter and broken. In the end, I couldn't do it. Couldn't be the reason the war started again. Serena, no, let me finish. She moved to the window, needing distance, needing air. I found out 3 days ago, went to a clinic, saw the ultrasound, and realized my entire life just imploded. The father is a stranger from a one-night stand. A stranger who, it turns out, is basically Mafia royalty about to marry someone else to stop people from killing each other. I'm not marrying anyone. His voice was steady, certain. Not Isabella, not anyone except the woman I choose. You can't choose me. The words exploded out of her. You think this is some fairy tale where you ride in and rescue me? Where we live happily ever after? Look around, Nico. Look at my life. I run a flower shop that barely breaks even. I live above a Korean restaurant. My furniture is from the street. I have no family, no connections, no power. I'm nobody. You're the mother of my child. An accident, a mistake. Not to me. He stood, crossing to her with purpose. Listen to me. Really listen. I don't care about the shop or the apartment or any of it. I care that when I walked into a random flower store in a thunderstorm, I found the first person in years who looked at me and saw just a man. Who was honest when honesty is the rarest commodity in my world. Who made me feel like maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for beyond duty and dynasty. That's not love. That's escape. Then let me ask you something. His hand came up slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently cupped her cheek. That night at the hotel, was it just escape for you too? Just scratching an itch? Because the woman I spent those hours with, the woman who laughed at my terrible jokes and told me about her parents and cried when I asked about her dreams. She wasn't pretending. Neither was I. Serena closed her eyes against the tenderness in his touch. It doesn't matter what it was. Reality is standing in my apartment. Reality is a baby neither of us planned. Reality is two families who are probably ready to kill each other because you walked away from a wedding. Let them. Her eyes snapped open. What? Let them be angry. Let them rage. I'm done sacrificing my life for peace bought with lies. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I told Isabella the truth in the sacristy while our families waited for us to emerge as husband and wife. Told her I'd met someone, that there might be a child, that I couldn't promise my life to her when my heart was somewhere else. What did she say? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She said, "Thank God." Turns out she's been in love with her father's head of security for 3 years. We stood there in our wedding clothes and laughed until we cried. This isn't funny, Nico. This is a disaster. This is a chance. His other hand came up to frame her face. A chance to choose differently. To build something real instead of living a scripted life. But I need to know, do you want this baby? The question cut through all her defenses. Yes. Do you want me involved? She faltered. I don't know how that works. I don't know what you're offering. Everything. The word was simple, absolute. I'm offering everything. My name, my protection, my presence. I want to be there for doctor's appointments and midnight cravings, and the first time we hear the heartbeat. I want to be a father, Serena, not a checkbook or a distant benefactor, a real father. You don't have to do this. I won't ask anything from you. Won't tell anyone. I'm not doing this out of obligation. His voice turned fierce. I'm doing this because 6 weeks ago, I walked into a flower shop and found the first honest thing in my life. Because that night at the hotel, I felt like myself for the first time in years. Because when I saw you at the cathedral today, every carefully constructed plan I'd made turned to ash. This baby is a surprise, yes. But you're not. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This is insane. We barely know each other. Then let's fix that. He didn't let go, didn't step back. Let me take you to dinner. Let me ask you questions and answer yours. Let me prove that this isn't just escape or obligation or temporary madness. Your family will adjust. They always do. The Russos are not my concern anymore. Isabella and I agreed to work together to smooth things over. She'll tell her father the truth, that she doesn't want the marriage either. United front. And if they don't accept it, if the war starts again? His expression hardened. Then I'll handle it. But I won't sacrifice you or our child for peace built on misery. That's not peace. That's just slower death. Serena pulled away from his hands, needing space to think. She walked to the kitchen, put the kettle on. Automatic, mindless. Nico followed but kept his distance, leaning against the counter, watching her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. I tore up the ultrasound, she said finally, the day I found out. I was so scared and angry and overwhelmed that I ripped it into pieces and threw it away. That's understandable. Then I put it back together, piece by piece, like a puzzle, because even though I was terrified, even though this is the worst possible timing, I wanted it. Wanted this baby. She turned to face him. But I never imagined you'd be part of the picture. I was preparing to do this alone. You don't have to. But what are you actually offering, Nico? Really? Because you can say everything all you want, but what does that mean in practice? You move in here? I move into wherever you live? We pretend we're a couple for the sake of the baby? I'm offering to figure it out together. He moved closer, careful, deliberate. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to blend your world in mine, but I know I want to try. The kettle whistled. Serena poured hot water over tea bags, her hands steadier now. She handed him a mug and cradled her own, letting the warmth ground her. Tell me about your life, she said. The real one, not the version you showed me at the hotel. Nico nodded, accepting the shift. I'm the only son of Antonio Valente. My mother died when I was 12, cancer. My father runs what the media politely calls import-export businesses. The reality is messier. We control shipping, labor unions, construction contracts. Some of it's legitimate. Most isn't. So you're actually in the Mafia. We don't use that word, but yes, essentially. He took a sip of tea. I've been groomed my entire life to take over when my father steps down. Every decision, every relationship, every moment calibrated toward that goal. The marriage to Isabella was supposed to cement an alliance that would end territorial disputes and create a united front. And now? Now I've blown that up spectacularly. He smiled without humor. My father is probably planning my funeral as we speak. That's not funny. It's a little funny, in a dark, existential way. He set down his mug. But here's the thing. I've spent 28 years doing what was expected, following the script, being the perfect heir, and I've been miserable every single day. Most people are miserable in their jobs. They don't blow up peace treaties about it. Most people's jobs don't require them to marry strangers and pretend to love them for 50 years. Serena couldn't argue with that. She moved to the couch, suddenly exhausted, and Nico followed, sitting on the other end, close but not crowding. What happens now? She asked. Honestly, I don't know. My father will demand a meeting. The Russos will want answers. Isabella and I will have to present a unified story that doesn't make either family look weak. It's going to be ugly for a while. And me? The baby? Protected. The word was steel. Whatever happens, whatever fallout comes, you stay safe. That's non-negotiable. You can't promise that. Watch me. His hand found hers on the couch between them, threading their fingers together. I need you to understand something, Serena. In my world, family is everything. Blood is sacred. This baby, our baby, is my blood, which means there's nothing I won't do to keep you both safe. Even start a war? Even that, but I'm hoping it won't come to it. They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked, the weight of impossible choices settling around them like snow. I need time, Serena said finally. This is all happening so fast. This morning I woke up planning to keep this secret forever. Now you're here, talking about protection and involvement and blowing up your entire life. I need time to process. How much time? I don't know. Days? Weeks? However long it takes for my brain to catch up with reality. Nico nodded slowly. Okay, but I have conditions. You don't get to set conditions. 2 conditions, he pressed on. First, you let me give you a number to call if anything happens. Anything at all. Strange people watching the shop, feeling unsafe, medical emergency, anything. You call and help comes immediately. That's paranoid. That's my world. And like it or not, you're connected to it now. His expression softened. Please, for my sanity if nothing else. Serena considered, then nodded. Fine. What's the second condition? Let me come to your next doctor's appointment. The request was so simple, so earnest, that it cracked something in her chest. You want to come to a prenatal appointment? I want to hear the heartbeat, see the ultrasound, be there. His thumb traced circles on her hand. I missed the first 6 weeks. I don't want to miss anything else. It's just a checkup. Very routine, boring even. I don't care, I want to be there. Serena felt her resistance crumbling. This wasn't the dangerous heir she'd read about in the papers. This was the man from the flower shop, the one who bought roses for a moment and asked about fate, the one she'd already started to care about before reality complicated everything. It's on Thursday, 2 p.m. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might regret it when you're sitting in a waiting room full of pregnant women and parenting magazines. Impossible. He squeezed her hand. But I should go. Let you rest. Process. Whatever you need. He stood, and Serena walked him to the door. In the threshold, he paused, turning back to her. Can I ask you something? Haven't you asked enough for one day? That almost smile. One more. That night at the hotel, did you feel it too? The connection? She could have lied, could have protected herself with denial. Instead, she chose honesty. Yes, I felt it. That's why I'm so angry. Because it was real for me and I thought it couldn't possibly be real for you. It was real, he said quietly. The realest thing in my life. Everything else is just noise. Then he was gone, footsteps echoing down the stairs, leaving her alone with thoughts that wouldn't stop spinning. Serena closed the door and leaned against it, one hand pressed to her stomach, where a tiny life was growing, a life that connected her irrevocably to a man she barely knew but couldn't seem to forget. Her phone buzzed. A new contact added, Nico, emergency only. She should have deleted it, should have maintained boundaries. Instead, she saved it and tried to imagine a world where this impossible situation somehow worked out. The next 3 days were surreal. Serena ran her shop, filled orders, smiled at customers, and pretended her life wasn't imploding. The wedding that wasn't became tabloid fodder. Valente-Russo alliance crumbles. Mystery woman cited as cause. She avoided the news, avoided social media, avoided everything except the simple rhythm of stems and soil. Nico texted once a day. Never pushing, never demanding, just simple messages. Thinking of you, hope you're well. Thursday still works for me. She didn't always respond, but she read every message. Tuesday afternoon, a black car pulled up outside her shop. Serena's heart jumped, thinking Nico had come despite promising space. Instead, a woman in her 30s emerged, elegant, professional, carrying a briefcase. The bell chimed. Serena Blackwell? Yes? My name is Catherine Ross. I'm an attorney. Nico Valente asked me to stop by. Every protective instinct Serena had flared to life. I don't need a lawyer. I'm not here to represent you. I'm here to provide information. Catherine set her briefcase on the counter. May I have 5 minutes of your time? Against her better judgment, Serena nodded. Catherine pulled out a folder. Mr. Valente wanted you to understand the security situation. Since the wedding cancellation, there's been significant tension between the families. Nothing violent yet, but the possibility exists. He's arranged for discreet protection, a detail that will monitor your shop and apartment but stay invisible unless needed. Absolutely not. I don't want bodyguards. They're not bodyguards. You'll never see them. They're simply insurance. I don't want to be monitored. Catherine's expression softened. I understand your hesitation, but please consider you're carrying the first grandchild of Antonio Valente. Whether you want that to matter or not, it does. There are people who might see you as leverage. The word sent ice down Serena's spine. Leverage for what? Negotiation, pressure. The Russos are embarrassed by the broken alliance. Some of the more aggressive members might see you as a way to force Nico back to the table. That's insane. That's reality. Catherine slid a card across the counter. This is my direct number. If you see anything unusual, anyone watching the shop, following you home, asking strange questions, you call immediately. Don't wait. Don't second guess. Serena picked up the card with numb fingers. What does Nico want from me? Really? Honestly, I think he wants you to be safe. Everything else is secondary. Catherine closed her briefcase. He's a good man trapped in a bad situation. The fact that he's trying to protect you while giving you space says a lot about his priorities. After Catherine left, Serena locked the shop early and went upstairs. She stood at her window watching the street below, looking for watchers, for threats, for any sign that her quiet life had become something dangerous. She saw nothing, which somehow made it worse. Wednesday night, she barely slept. Thursday morning arrived with rain. Of course it was raining, and Serena dressed carefully for the appointment. She told Nico to meet her at the clinic, not wanting him to know her routine, her patterns. It was a small boundary, but she needed it. He was waiting outside when she arrived, standing under the awning, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, looking nothing like the Mafia heir from the papers, and everything like the man who'd bought roses in a storm. You came, she said. I promised. They walked into the clinic together, and Serena felt eyes tracking them. The receptionist's knowing smile, other patients' curious glances. She filled out paperwork while Nico sat beside her, radiating protective energy that made the small waiting room feel even smaller. Ms. Blackwell? A nurse appeared in the doorway. We're ready for you. Serena stood, and Nico followed. In the examination room, the nurse took her blood pressure, asked routine questions, and left them alone to wait for the doctor. Nervous? Nico asked. Terrified. You? Same. You don't have to do the whole thing. If it's too medical, too weird. I want to be here. He reached for her hand. All of it. Whatever you're comfortable with me seeing. The doctor arrived, Dr. Sarah Chen, warm and efficient. She smiled at them both. So, 8 weeks along now? Yes, Serena confirmed. And this is? The father, Nico said before Serena could answer. Nico. Dr. Chen nodded like this was completely normal. Wonderful to have you both here. Let's take a look, shall we? The ultrasound machine hummed to life. Gel on Serena's stomach, cold and clinical, the wand pressing, searching, static on the screen. Then a flutter, a pulse, a tiny bean-shaped shadow. There's your baby, Dr. Chen said, adjusting the image. And there's the heartbeat. The sound filled the room, rapid, strong, undeniable. Proof of life, of connection, of everything changing. Serena felt tears streaming down her face before she realized she was crying. Beside her, Nico had gone absolutely still, his hand crushing hers, his eyes locked on the screen with an expression of pure wonder. That's... His voice cracked. That's our baby. Measuring right on track, Dr. Chen continued, taking measurements, pointing out tiny features. Everything looks healthy. Due date, December 20th. You're doing great, Mama. The appointment continued. Questions answered, prescriptions written, next visit scheduled. Serena barely heard any of it. She was locked in the moment, in the sound of that heartbeat, in the reality that this wasn't abstract anymore. This was a life, their child. When they left the clinic, the rain had stopped. They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to separate. Thank you, Nico said finally, for letting me be there. You heard it, right? The heartbeat? I'll never forget it. He looked at her with something that might have been love or might have been hope. Serena, I know you need time. I know this is complicated. But after hearing that, after seeing our baby, I need you to know I'm all in. Whatever it takes, whatever you need, I'm here. She believed him. Against all logic, against all her protective instincts, she believed him. Walk me back to the shop? She asked. They walked through post-rain streets, not touching but close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. Nico told her about his conversation with his father, about Isabella's surprising support, about the delicate negotiations happening behind closed doors. Serena told him about the lawyer's visit, about her fear, about lying awake at night imagining worst-case scenarios. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. Either of you. You keep saying that, but you can't control everything. Watch me try. They reached the flower shop and Serena unlocked the door. In the threshold, she turned back. Same time next month? For the next appointment? I'll be there. Nico, she hesitated. I'm starting to believe you, that you want this, want us, and that terrifies me more than anything. Why? Because wanting something this much means I can lose it, and I've lost enough. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Then we'll be terrified together, and we'll figure it out, one day at a time. He left, and Serena closed the shop behind him, leaning against the door with her hand pressed over her heart, where hope and fear were waging war. One day at a time. Maybe that was all anyone could promise. The pattern established itself over the next 6 weeks, with a rhythm that felt almost normal. Nico showed up every evening at closing time, never asking permission, never making assumptions. He simply appeared, carrying coffee, helping sweep floors, moving heavy soil bags, existing in her space without demanding more than she could give. At first, Serena tried to maintain distance. She'd hand him tasks without conversation, treat him like hired help, build walls with silence. But Nico was patient in a way that wore down her defenses more effectively than any grand gesture could have. You don't have to do this, she said one evening in late May, watching him organize her storage room with methodical precision. Do what? Pretend to care about flower shop inventory. He looked up from a box of ribbon spools, something amused flickering in his eyes. Who says I'm pretending? Did you know you have 4 different shades of cream ribbon? That seems excessive. They're all different. That's ivory, that's eggshell, that's champagne. They're all white. They're not white. White is white. These are... She stopped, catching the smile he was trying to hide. You're messing with me. Maybe a little. He set down the ribbons and moved closer. But I genuinely want to understand your work. What makes you choose one shade over another? Why you spend 3 hours on a single arrangement? What you see in flowers that other people miss? Serena felt something loosen in her chest. Most people think flowers are just decoration, pretty but meaningless. And you don't? Flowers are promises. Every bloom says something. Love, apology, celebration, grief. People come to me at their most vulnerable moments and trust me to speak for them when they can't find words. She touched a bucket of white roses. These aren't just flowers. They're proposals and funerals and every important moment in between. Nico was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. That's beautiful, the way you see it. It's just my job. No. He shook his head. It's your calling. There's a difference. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Dr. Chen's office confirming her next appointment. When she hung up, Nico was watching her expectantly. Everything okay? Fine, just scheduling the 12-week ultrasound. When? Next Tuesday. But you don't have to... I'll be there. It wasn't a question. Serena nodded, accepting what had become inevitable. He would be there. He would keep showing up. And slowly, terrifyingly, she was starting to want him to. That night, after Nico left, she stood in her apartment looking at the small changes his presence had created. A better lock on her door, installed without fanfare. Groceries in her fridge, delivered by a service he'd arranged. A new prenatal vitamin prescription, filled and waiting on her counter. He never asked credit for these things, never made her feel indebted. He simply saw needs and filled them with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent his life solving problems. It should have felt controlling. Instead, it felt like care. The thought scared her more than she wanted to admit. Tuesday's appointment revealed a baby that looked more human than bean-shaped, with tiny limbs and a profile that made Serena's breath catch. Nico stared at the ultrasound screen like it held the secrets of the universe, his hand gripping hers so tightly she lost feeling in her fingers. "Can you tell the gender yet?" he asked Dr. Chen. "Not quite. Another month or so. Do you want to know when we can tell?" Nico looked at Serena. "Do we?" The casual "we" should have annoyed her. Instead, it felt right, like they were building something together, one small decision at a time. "Yes," she said. "I want to know." They left the clinic with another grainy photo and a scheduled appointment for 16 weeks. On the sidewalk, Nico stopped walking. "What?" Serena asked. "I want to show you something. Will you come with me?" Every instinct told her to say no, to maintain boundaries, to keep their relationship confined to flower shops and medical appointments. But curiosity won. "Where?" "Somewhere I think you'll like. Trust me?" She shouldn't. She barely knew him beyond these careful weeks of closing time visits and doctor's appointments. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same vulnerability she felt, the same desperate hope that this impossible situation might somehow work. "Okay." He led her to a car, not the black SUV she'd expected, but a simple sedan. They drove through Manhattan streets, heading uptown, until he pulled up in front of a brownstone in the East 70s. "What is this?" "Come see." The building was beautiful in an understated way. Old brick, iron railings, window boxes that currently held nothing but soil. Nico unlocked the front door and led her inside to a space that took her breath away. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, windows that flooded the rooms with afternoon light. It was empty but elegant, worn but full of potential. "What is this place?" Serena asked again. "A possibility." Nico stood in the center of the living room, hands in his pockets, watching her reaction carefully. "I bought it last week. Been sitting empty for months. Previous owner was an elderly woman who left it to her niece who lives in California and wanted to sell." "You bought a brownstone." "I bought a home." He moved to the windows overlooking a small backyard. 3 bedrooms upstairs, office on the 3rd floor, kitchen that needs updating, backyard that could use someone who actually knows about plants. Serena's heart was pounding. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to see what I'm building, not for obligation or duty or because a baby is coming, though that's part of it, but because I want a life that's mine, a home, not a fortress, a future I choose instead of one chosen for me. This is too much, too fast." "I'm not asking you to move in tomorrow." He turned from the window. "I'm asking you to see that I'm serious. That when I say I want to be part of this, I mean building a real life. Not just showing up for appointments and helping at the shop. A life where our child has a home with room to grow, where you have space to breathe. I have an apartment. You have a room above a restaurant." His voice was gentle, not judgmental. "I've seen the water stains, the broken heating, the stairs you struggle with when you're carrying supplies. This isn't about money or showing off. It's about giving you options." Serena walked through the empty rooms, touching walls, imagining a nursery with morning light, a real kitchen, space for more than just survival. "I can't accept this," she said finally. "I'm not offering it to you. I'm offering to share it. There's a difference." "Your family, they know about this place?" Something dark crossed his expression. "My father knows I bought a property. He doesn't know why or where. I'm keeping certain things separate until I figure out how to navigate the situation." "What situation?" Nico was quiet for a moment, then gestured to the built-in window seat. They sat, and he took a breath like a man preparing to jump off a cliff. "The peace with the Russos is fragile. Isabella and I presented a united front. Mutual decision, still allies, no bad blood. But her father, Marco Russo, he's old school, sees the broken wedding as disrespect. My father is managing him, but it's delicate. And me? The baby? Hidden for now, protected." He took her hand. "My father knows there's someone. He doesn't know who or where or about the pregnancy. I've kept that information locked down tight because once it's out, you become a piece on the board. Leverage, a bargaining chip." Fear spiked through her. "Maybe I should leave, go somewhere else, disappear." "No." His grip tightened. Running makes you vulnerable. Staying close, staying protected. That keeps you safe. Safe in a cage. Safe and alive. The fierceness in his voice startled her. I know you value independence. I know this feels like control. But please, Serena, trust me on this. The invisible protection, the security measures, they're necessary. I hate this. I hate that my baby is already part of some power game. I know, I hate it too. He pulled her closer, and she let him, needing the comfort even as she resented needing it. But I'm working on a solution, a way to restructure things so the family business becomes legitimate, so our child inherits choices, not obligations. That's impossible. You can't just make a crime family legitimate. Not overnight, but over years, with the right strategy, it's possible. His hand moved to her barely there bump. I want our son or daughter to have the childhood I didn't, to choose their own path. That's worth fighting for. Serena covered his hand with hers. You keep saying these things like they're simple, like wanting something makes it possible. Maybe I'm naive, but I'd rather be naive and fighting than cynical and resigned. They sat in the empty brownstone as afternoon light shifted across hardwood floors, two people trying to build something real from accidental connection and stubborn hope. The weeks blurred together. June arrived with summer heat that made Serena's small apartment unbearable. Nico started bringing portable fans, then a window AC unit, installing it himself despite her protests. She stopped protesting after the first night of actual sleep she'd had in weeks. The baby grew. Her body changed in ways that felt alien and miraculous. Nico noticed everything, brought her ginger tea for morning sickness, figured out which foods made her nauseous, learned to recognize when she needed space versus when she needed company. You're getting too good at this, she said one evening, accepting the exact sandwich she'd been craving without having to ask. Is that a complaint? An observation. You're either psychic or I'm becoming predictable. Or maybe I'm just paying attention. He sat beside her on the shop's back step, where they'd started taking evening breaks. You rub your left temple when you're tired. Touch your stomach when you're worried. Get quiet when you're overwhelmed. I'm just learning your language. That's terrifying. Why? Because it means you see me, really see me. I'm not used to that. Get used to it. He bumped her shoulder with his. You're stuck with me now. The casual intimacy should have felt presumptuous. Instead, it felt like coming home. July brought the 16-week appointment and news that made Nico's entire face transform with joy. A boy, Dr. Chen confirmed, pointing to the ultrasound screen. Very clear. Congratulations. Serena felt tears streaming down her face as Nico pressed his forehead to hers, both of them laughing and crying in the small examination room. A son, he whispered. We're having a son. That night he took her to dinner, a small Italian place in the West Village, quiet and intimate. They talked about names, about the future, about dreams neither had voiced before. Matteo, Nico said suddenly. It means gift, gift from above. That's beautiful. My grandfather's name. He died when I was young, but I remember him being kind in a world that demanded hardness. I'd like our son to carry that forward. Matteo Blackwell, Serena tested. Matteo Valente. The name hung between them, heavy with implication. Serena set down her fork. He'll have your last name? If you'll allow it. I want him to have my protection, my name, my legacy. The good parts, anyway. Nico reached across the table. But I'm not demanding. If you want him to be Matteo Blackwell, I'll support that too. What about Matteo Blackwell Valente? Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then pleasure. You do that? Hyphenate? He's both of ours. Why shouldn't his name reflect that? Matteo Blackwell Valente. Nico smiled, genuine and unguarded. I love it. They left the restaurant hand in hand, a casual intimacy that had developed so gradually Serena couldn't pinpoint when it started. On the sidewalk, Nico pulled her close. Thank you, he said. For what? For letting me in. For trusting me with this. For being brave enough to build something with me even though I know you're terrified. Who says I'm terrified? Your hand is shaking. She looked down at their joined hands and laughed because he was right. Fine, I'm terrified. Happy? Not happy you're scared, but happy you're doing it anyway. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. That's real courage, Serena, doing the scary thing because it matters. August arrived with news that shattered their careful peace. Serena was closing the shop when three men walked in. She knew immediately something was wrong, the way they moved, the cold assessment in their eyes, the carefully neutral expressions that promised violence. "We're closed," she said, hand sliding toward the panic button Nico had installed beneath the counter. "We won't take long." The leader, 40-something, expensive suit, scar along his neck, smiled without warmth. "Just wanted to introduce ourselves, let you know we're aware of your situation." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Nico Valente's little secret, the reason he abandoned the Russo alliance." He moved closer, and Serena's hand found the button. "Marco Russo sends his regards, says he hopes you and the baby stay healthy. Would be a shame if anything happened." The threat was clear as crystal. Serena pressed the button. "You need to leave. Now." "We're going. Just wanted you to know, decisions have consequences. Nico chose you over peace. Hope you're worth it." They left as suddenly as they'd arrived, disappearing into evening foot traffic. Serena locked the door with shaking hands and called Nico. He arrived in under 3 minutes with two men she didn't recognize, fury radiating off him in waves. "What did they say?" "Exactly." She repeated the conversation, watching his expression darken with each word. When she finished, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Nico, no, listen, I thought we had more time, thought I could keep you separate, keep you safe. But they found you anyway." "What does this mean?" He pulled back, hands framing her face. "It means we need to change strategy. No more hiding, no more keeping you at arm's length from my world. You need real protection, not just surveillance. I'm not going into hiding. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me move you temporarily, until I can negotiate a permanent solution." "Move me where?" "The brownstone. It's secure, monitored, defensible. And I'll be there. Not down the hall or a phone call away. Actually there." "You want me to move in with you?" "I want you and our son to be safe. Everything else is negotiable." Serena looked into his eyes and saw genuine fear beneath the controlled fury. These men had threatened their baby, had turned their private situation into ammunition for a war she didn't understand. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay. I'll move to the brownstone, but on conditions. Name them. First, I keep the shop. I'm not giving up my business." "Agreed. We'll increase security there, but you keep running it." "Second, you don't make decisions about the baby without consulting me. Not his safety, not his future, nothing. We decide together." "Absolutely." "Third," she hesitated. "Third, you tell me everything. No more protecting me from information. I need to understand what we're dealing with." Nico nodded slowly. "That's fair. But some of it is going to be ugly. I'm carrying your son into a world where men show up at my flower shop with threats. I think I can handle ugly." He kissed her then, sudden and fierce and full of everything they'd been dancing around for months. Serena kissed him back, pouring fear and hope and desperate trust into the connection. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nico rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to get through this," he promised. "You keep saying that, because it's true. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The move happened within 48 hours. Nico's people packed her apartment with military efficiency while Serena watched, clutching a box of personal items she wouldn't let anyone else touch. The ultrasound photos. Her parents' wedding album. The roses Nico had bought that first rainy night, dried and pressed. The brownstone welcomed her with furniture that had appeared as if by magic. Comfortable, tasteful, clearly chosen with care. Her bedroom was on the second floor, spacious and bright. Next to it, a nursery already in progress, painted soft gray with white trim. "You did this?" she asked, touching the walls. "Had help, but I chose the colors." Nico stood in the doorway, uncertain in a way she'd never seen him. "I can repaint if you hate it. It's perfect." The relief on his face was almost comical. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She turned to face him fully. "Where's your room?" "Third floor. I wanted you to have space, not feel crowded." "Show me." He led her upstairs to a master suite that was pure Nico. Minimal furniture, dark colors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the backyard. It felt like him, controlled but with hints of softness in the details. Books on the nightstand. A photo of them from the last ultrasound on the dresser. "When did you take that?" she asked, picking up the frame. "Dr. Chen gave me a copy. I hope that's okay." Serena studied the image, her and Nico in profile, both staring at the ultrasound screen with matching expressions of wonder. They looked like a couple, like partners, like people building a life together. "It's okay," she said quietly. That night, she couldn't sleep. The brownstone was too quiet, too big, too different from her cramped apartment. At 2 a.m., she gave up and went downstairs to the kitchen. Nico was already there, drinking whiskey at the counter. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Thinking too much." He poured her water without asking. "You okay? Need anything?" "Just company, maybe." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind they'd developed over months of closing time conversations. Eventually, Nico spoke. "I need to tell you about my father, about what's coming." Serena set down her water. "I'm listening." "Antonio Valente is a hard man, fair in his way but ruthless when necessary. He built the family business from nothing, protected it through wars and betrayals, and he expects absolute loyalty from his sons." "Sons plural?" "I have a younger half-brother, different mother. We're not close." "And your father? He doesn't know about me?" "He knows there's someone. He doesn't know details. But after today, after the Russos found you, that protection is gone. He'll investigate. He'll find out everything." "What happens then?" Nico's jaw tightened. "He'll want to meet you, assess whether you're a liability or an asset. It won't be pleasant." "Should I be scared?" "You should be prepared. My father respects strength. If you show fear, he'll use it. If you show spine, he'll respect you." "Maybe." "That's not very reassuring." "I know." He took her hand. "But I'll be there. And whatever he says, whatever he demands, remember, you're not alone in this. We face him together." The meeting came sooner than expected. 2 days later, a car arrived to take them to Antonio Valente's estate in Westchester. Serena dressed carefully, simple black dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. She wanted to look composed, strong, unintimidatable. The estate was massive, gates, guards, a mansion that spoke of generations of accumulated power. Nico held her hand as they walked inside, his grip the only sign of tension. Antonio Valente waited in a study that looked like it belonged in a castle. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, with eyes exactly like Nico's, and a presence that filled the room like smoke. "So," he said, studying Serena with clinical precision, "this is the woman who ended the Russo alliance." "Father, this is Serena Blackwell. Serena. My father, Antonio." Serena extended her hand, forcing herself to meet Antonio's gaze directly. "Mr. Valente?" He took her hand, his grip firm, assessing. "You don't look like much. What did my son see in you that was worth starting a war?" "I wouldn't know. You'd have to ask him." Something flickered in Antonio's eyes, surprise maybe, or approval. "Sit, both of you." They sat on a leather couch while Antonio remained standing, maintaining dominance through position. "I've had you investigated," he said bluntly. "Orphan at 19, struggled to keep a failing flower shop alive. No criminal record, no connections, no family. You're nobody." "That's accurate," Serena agreed, refusing to rise to the bait. "And yet my son throws away a strategic marriage for you, endangers decades of careful diplomacy, creates vulnerability the Russos are already exploiting." He moved closer. "What I'm trying to understand is why. What makes you worth it?" "Nothing," Serena said. "I didn't ask for any of this. Your son made his own choices. Choices have consequences. The Russos are threatening war. They see weakness, opportunity, your existence." He gestured at her visible pregnancy. "Makes everything worse. Then maybe you should have raised your son to be better at following orders." The words were out before Serena could stop them. Nico tensed beside her, but Antonio surprised them both by laughing. "Spirit, good. You'll need it." He finally sat, steepling his fingers. "Here's the situation. The Russos want blood or compensation for the broken alliance. They're not getting blood. Nico is my heir, and I protect what's mine. But they are getting concessions, territory, contracts, money. It's going to cost the family millions to buy peace. I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I want your cooperation. Antonio leaned forward. The child you're carrying is my grandson, my blood. That makes you family, whether either of us wants it or not. And in this family, we protect our own. But protection comes with expectations. What expectations? Loyalty, discretion, obedience to family decisions that affect collective security. His eyes drilled into hers. Can you offer that? Serena thought about saying yes, about taking the easy path. Instead, she chose honesty. I can offer loyalty to people who earn it, discretion when it doesn't compromise my values. But obedience? No, I won't be controlled, even for protection. The room went silent. Nico's hand found hers, squeezing support. Antonio studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, sharp and approving. You'll do, he said simply. Nico, you chose well. She has spine. The tension broke like a snapped wire. Antonio stood, suddenly all business. The wedding will be small, immediate family only. We'll announce it after the baby is born. Frame it as a love match that resulted in Nico abandoning the Russo alliance for true feeling, softens the political blow. Wedding? Serena's voice came out strangled. Of course. You think I'm letting my grandson be born out of wedlock? Bad for the family image. Antonio was already moving toward his desk. 3 weeks. That gives you time to prepare and me time to finalize the Russo negotiations. Any objections? Several, Serena managed. Save them for someone who cares. Nico, make sure she has whatever she needs. Dress, rings, whatever women require for these things. He waved a hand dismissively. Now get out. I have work to do. They left in stunned silence. In the car back to Manhattan, Serena finally found her voice. Did your father just order us to get married? Appears so. Nico's voice was carefully neutral. And you're okay with this? Honestly? He turned to face her. I was going to ask you anyway. He just accelerated the timeline. You were going to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Propose. Yes, though I imagined something more romantic than my father's study. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Was planning to do this properly, with flowers and a speech and everything. Serena stared at the box like it might explode. This is insane. Probably, but we're already living together, having a baby, and apparently about to get married in 3 weeks. Might as well embrace the insanity. He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. This was my mother's, the only thing of hers I kept. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. Nico, you can say no. We can tell my father to go to hell and figure out our own timeline. But Serena, I'm going to ask anyway, so you might as well hear it now. He took her hand. Will you marry me? Not because my father demands it, or because we're having a baby, but because somewhere between flower shops and ultrasounds, I fell in love with you. Because I want to build a life with you, raise our son together, and face whatever comes as partners. Will you marry me? Serena looked at the ring, at Nico's hopeful face, at the impossible situation they'd created together. Every logical bone in her body screamed to say no. They barely knew each other. This was too fast, too complicated, too everything. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same thing she'd seen that rainy night months ago. Genuine, honest connection. A man who'd chosen her over duty, over dynasty, over the easy path. A man she'd already started to love back. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll marry you. The joy that transformed his face made every terrifying choice worth it. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Thank you, he whispered against her lips, for trusting me, for choosing this. Don't make me regret it. Never. He kissed her again, deeper this time, promise and passion intertwined. I swear on everything, Serena. I'll spend my life making sure you never regret choosing me. 3 weeks later, in a small ceremony at the brownstone with Antonio and a handful of witnesses, Serena Blackwell became Serena Valente. She wore a simple white dress, carried white roses, and promised forever to a man she'd met in a thunderstorm. And somehow, impossibly, It felt exactly right. The first month of marriage was an education in compromise. Serena learned that Nico took his coffee black at 5 a.m., that he worked from the third-floor office until midnight most nights, that the men who appeared at odd hours weren't friends but soldiers reporting in. She learned the subtle language of his world, the difference between a business meeting and a negotiation, between respect and fear, between the man he showed the world and the man he was when they were alone. Nico learned that Serena needed the flower shop like oxygen, that she woke at 3 a.m. with pregnancy insomnia and made terrible decisions about nursery paint colors, that she cried at commercials and then got angry at herself for crying. He learned to read her silences, to know when she needed space versus when she needed him to pull her close and promise everything would be okay, even when neither of them believed it. They learned each other with the intensity of people building a foundation while standing on quicksand. September arrived with cooler weather and Serena's belly growing impossible to hide. At 24 weeks, she could no longer pretend the pregnancy wasn't real, wasn't changing everything about her body and her life. Nico treated her expanding form with reverence that bordered on worship, his hands constantly drawn to the curve of her stomach, his face lighting up whenever Matteo kicked. "He's strong," Nico said one evening, palm pressed against a particularly vigorous movement. "Going to be a fighter. Or a soccer player. Can you ask him to stop using my ribs as a goal?" "Matteo, your mother requests you redirect your athletic ambitions." Nico spoke directly to her belly, and Serena laughed despite the discomfort. "There. I've lodged a formal complaint on your behalf." "I don't think he's listening. Clearly gets his stubborn streak from you." "Excuse me? You're the one who blew up a peace treaty rather than have a conversation like a normal person." "Fair point." He kissed her stomach, then moved up to capture her lips. "We're both disasters. Poor Matteo doesn't stand a chance." These moments of lightness were islands in increasingly turbulent waters. The Russo situation remained volatile despite Antonio's negotiations. Marco Russo had accepted financial compensation, but made it clear the slight to his family's honor wasn't forgotten. Isabella, to her credit, had been vocal in supporting the mutual dissolution, but her father saw only weakness and opportunity. The threat came on a Tuesday in late September. Serena was at the flower shop. Nico had agreed to let her continue working with the condition that 2 guards remained visible at all times. When her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Mrs. Valente?" The voice was smooth, cultured, with an edge that made her skin crawl. "We haven't been formally introduced. Marco Russo." Her blood went cold. "What do you want?" "Just to talk. To understand what exactly my daughter found so lacking that your husband chose you instead. If you have something to say it to Nico." "But you're so much more interesting." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Tell me, does Nico know you're still working? Still exposing yourself and his heir to unnecessary risk? Seems careless for such a supposedly devoted husband." "This conversation is over." "Wait." The command was sharp. "One more thing. When you see Nico tonight, tell him that accidents happen. Flower shops catch fire. Pregnant women trip on stairs. It would be terrible if something unfortunate occurred because he's not holding up his end of our agreement." The line went dead. Serena's hands shook so badly she dropped the phone. One of the guards was at her side immediately. "Mrs. Valente, what happened?" "Call Nico. Now." He arrived within minutes, fury and fear warring in his expression as she recounted the call. By the time she finished, his jaw was so tight she worried his teeth would crack. "Pack up. You're done for the day." "Nico. Not negotiable. Marco Russo just threatened you directly. That changes everything." They drove back to the brownstone in tense silence. Inside, Nico made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, his voice dropping into the cold, dangerous register she'd only heard a few times before. When he finally hung up, he looked 10 years older. "What's happening?" Serena asked. "My father is calling an emergency meeting. The Russos violated the terms of the agreement by making direct threats against you. That's grounds to void the entire deal." "Which means what?" "War, probably." He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "Unless we can find another solution." Serena sat beside him, one hand on her belly where Matteo was kicking his usual evening routine. "What kind of solution?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting them use fear to control us. You're my wife. You're carrying my son. That makes you untouchable in my world. Marco needs to understand that. The meeting happened that night at Antonio's estate. Nico didn't want Serena there, but she insisted. This threat was against her. She deserved to be part of the response. The conference room was full of men she didn't know, all of them radiating the controlled violence that seemed to be a prerequisite for Nico's world. Antonio sat at the head of the table, and for the first time, Serena saw where Nico learned his command presence. The situation is simple, Antonio began without preamble. Marco Russo called my daughter-in-law and made threats against her life and the life of my grandson. This is unacceptable. The question is how we respond. We go to war, one of the men said immediately. Show them we don't tolerate threats. War costs money and lives, another countered. We just paid millions to avoid this exact situation. Then maybe we take out Marco specifically. Send a message that threatening family has consequences. Serena listened to them discuss murder and warfare like they were debating restaurant choices, her stomach churning. This was Nico's world. These were the choices he'd been raised to make. There's another option, Nico said quietly, and every head turned toward him. We make the threat irrelevant. Explain, Antonio commanded. Marco threatened Serena because she's vulnerable, a civilian with no protection beyond what I provide. But what if she wasn't a civilian anymore? He looked at his father. What if she was formally recognized as family, inducted into the structure with all the protections that entails? Silence fell like a hammer. You want to make your wife a made member? Someone asked incredulously. That's never been done. Then we'll be the first. Nico's voice was steel. Every family member has sworn protection. An attack on one is an attack on all. If Serena is formally recognized, threatening her becomes the same as threatening Antonio himself. Marco won't dare. Antonio studied his son with an expression Serena couldn't read. You understand what you're asking? Bringing her fully into this world? There's no going back from that. I understand. And you? Antonio turned to Serena. Do you understand? Being family in this world means obligations, not just protections. It means loyalty to the organization above all else. It means accepting that your husband's work sometimes requires moral flexibility. It means raising your son to understand this legacy. Serena's mouth was dry. Every instinct screamed to run, to refuse, to grab Matteo and disappear into the kind of normal life she'd once imagined. But she looked at Nico, at the man who'd chosen her over dynasty, who'd stood between her and every threat, who'd built them a home and a future despite impossible odds. I understand, she said clearly, and I accept. The ceremony happened 3 days later in the same conference room. It was nothing like Serena imagined. No robes or chanting, just a room full of dangerous men and words that bound her to a life she'd never wanted. She swore oaths she didn't fully understand, signed documents that probably weren't legal, and accepted a ring that marked her as protected property of the Valente organization. When it was done, Antonio kissed both her cheeks in the traditional gesture of family. Welcome, he said simply. You're one of us now. Nico took her home in silence. In their bedroom, he finally spoke. I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you. I know. You could have said no, run. I would have found another way to protect you. Serena touched his face, turning him to meet her eyes. I said yes because I choose you. This life, this world. It's terrifying and wrong and nothing I imagined. But you're in it. Matteo will be in it. So I'm in it too. We protect each other. That's what family means. He kissed her with desperation and gratitude, and she kissed him back with acceptance and love and the stubborn determination that had kept her alive through every impossible situation life had thrown at her. The threat from Marco Russo evaporated overnight. Word of Serena's induction spread through the underground network with the speed of wildfire. She was no longer a civilian, no longer vulnerable. She was Valente family, protected by the same ruthless force that kept Antonio in power. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like surrender. October brought crisp air in Serena's third trimester. She closed the flower shop reluctantly. Nico convinced her the physical demands were too much at 7 months pregnant. Instead, she focused on the nursery, on preparing for Matteo's arrival, on learning to be part of a family that conducted business through violence and fear. She attended family dinners where they discussed territory disputes over pasta. Sat through meetings where men reported on collections and enforcement actions. Learned to recognize the difference between business problems and personal threats, between acceptable losses and unforgivable disrespect. And slowly, terrifyingly, it started to feel normal. "I'm losing myself," she told Nico one night, her hands cradling her massive belly. "I used to be a florist. Now I'm married to the mob, sitting through meetings about which corrupt official to bribe. How did this become my life?" "You're still you," he said, pulling her close despite the awkward angles her pregnant form created. "You're still the woman who chose honesty over easy lies, who builds beauty from chaos, who looked at my father and refused to be intimidated. This world hasn't changed that. You're just learning to survive in it." "What if I don't want to just survive? What if I want to actually live?" "Then we'll figure out how to do that." He kissed her temple. "I meant what I said about making the business legitimate. It's slow, but I'm working on it. Transferring assets to legal enterprises, closing down the worst operations, building something Matteo can inherit without shame. Your father will never allow it. My father is 68 and tired. He talks big, but he's ready to step back. Give me 5 years, and the Valente name will mean real estate and shipping, not extortion and violence." Serena wanted to believe him, but she'd seen enough of this world to know that leaving wasn't simple, that legitimate businesses still had roots in illegitimate foundations that the past never really let go. November arrived with Thanksgiving preparations, and a baby who seemed determined to break her ribs from the inside. At 32 weeks, Serena was huge, uncomfortable, and thoroughly done with pregnancy. She waddled more than walked, slept in 20-minute increments, and cried at absolutely everything. Nico handled it with patience that bordered on saintly, rubbing her feet without complaint, making 3 a.m. food runs for bizarre cravings, and never once suggesting she was being unreasonable when she yelled at him for breathing too loudly. "You're going to be such a good father," she said one evening, watching him assemble the crib with focused determination. "How do you know?" "Because you're good to me, patient, kind. You see what I need before I ask for it. That's what Matteo will need too." He set down the screwdriver and came to where she sat in the rocking chair they'd bought last week. Kneeling beside her, he placed both hands on her belly. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "What if I'm not enough? What if I make the same mistakes my father made?" "You won't." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She covered his hands with hers. "Because you're already asking the questions he never did. You're already trying to build something better. That's what makes you different." Matteo kicked hard enough that they both felt it, and Nico laughed, pure and unguarded and full of joy. In moments like these, Serena could almost forget the complicated reality of their life, almost pretend they were just two people in love, preparing for their first child, building a normal future. Almost. The illusion shattered on a Monday in early December when 3 men walked into the Brownstones' backyard. Serena was in the kitchen making tea when she saw them through the window, strangers, armed, moving with purpose. She hit the panic button and grabbed the phone, but before she could dial, Nico was already there, gun in hand, positioning himself between her and the threat. "Get upstairs. Lock yourself in the bathroom. Don't come out until I tell you." Nico. "Now, Serena." She ran, or tried to. 8 months pregnant made running more like urgent waddling. Behind her, she heard the back door crash open, heard voices raised in anger, heard a sound that might have been a gunshot. In the bathroom, she locked the door with shaking hands and called 911, then Antonio, then sat on the floor with her back against the tub and prayed. It felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes before she heard Nico's voice outside the door. "It's me. You can come out." She opened it to find him disheveled but unharmed, though his knuckles were bleeding and his expression was murder incarnate. "What happened?" "Russo soldiers. Low-level idiots Marco sent to scare you. They're gone." "Gone where?" "You don't want to know." He pulled her close and she felt him shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought after the induction they'd leave you alone. I was wrong. This was a message to you, not me. Same thing. They came into our home, Serena, while you were here alone. If I hadn't been in the office, if I'd been 5 minutes later..." His voice cracked. "I can't do this anymore. Can't live with the constant threat. Something has to change." "What are you saying?" He pulled back, hands framing her face. "I'm saying it's time to end this. Really end it. not through negotiation or money or careful diplomacy. Through force, through making it absolutely clear that touching you means death. That's war, yes, but a short one. Surgical. We take out the people making decisions to threaten you, and the rest will fall in line. People will die. People are already dying. At least this way it ends. At least our son grows up in a world where his mother is safe. Serena wanted to argue, wanted to find another solution, wanted to believe peace was possible without violence. But she was tired. Tired of fear, of threats, of living like a target. And when she looked into Nico's eyes, she saw the same exhaustion mirrored back. "Okay," she whispered. "Do what you have to do." The war lasted exactly 48 hours. Antonio called in favors and deployed resources with the efficiency of a man who'd been preparing for exactly this confrontation. The Russo soldiers who'd entered the brownstone disappeared. Two of Marco's key lieutenants had fatal accidents, and Marco Russo himself received a visit from Antonio and Nico that ended with him agreeing to immediate and permanent cessation of all hostilities. Serena didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know how many people died to buy her safety, how many families lost fathers and sons so she could sleep without fear. She just accepted the silence that followed, the absence of threats, the visible relaxation in Nico's shoulders, the knowledge that they'd crossed a line there was no uncrossing. "It's over," Nico told her on the third night, climbing into bed beside her exhausted form. "Really over. Marco signed a binding agreement. Any further action against our family voids his protection and opens him to retaliation. He won't risk it." "What did you do to him?" "Nothing. My father did the talking. Sometimes age and reputation are more effective than violence." "I don't believe you." "Smart woman." He pulled her close, careful of her belly. "But you don't need to carry this. Let me carry it for both of us." "That's not fair to you." "Life's not fair, but I can handle it. I've been trained for this since I was a child. You haven't, so let me protect you from the worst of it." Serena wanted to argue, wanted to demand full transparency, but she was so tired and he was warm, and Matteo was doing gymnastics inside her, and sometimes survival meant accepting imperfect solutions. "I love you," she said instead. She felt him go still. They'd been married for months, lived together, were about to have a baby. But somehow, they'd never said those 3 words. "Say it again, sir," he whispered. "I love you. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. I love you, Nico Valente. Completely. Terrifyingly. Forever." He kissed her with something that felt like reverence, like gratitude, like a man who'd been wandering in darkness and finally found light. "I love you too," he said against her lips. "Have since the moment you looked at me in that flower shop and saw just a man instead of a name. Have loved you through every impossible moment since. Will love you until I stop breathing." They held each other in the darkness, two people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other despite everything. Outside, the city hummed with life and violence and endless possibility. Inside, for the first time, Serena felt safe. 2 weeks later, at 36 weeks pregnant, Serena went into labor. It started with back pain she ignored, progressed to contractions she tried to breathe through, and culminated in her water breaking while she was arranging flowers in the brownstone's kitchen. A small concession Nico had made to let her maintain some connection to her old life. "Nico," she called, and he appeared instantly, took one look at the puddle on the floor, and went into crisis mode. The drive to the hospital was a blur of contractions, and Nico's steady voice telling her to breathe, that she was doing great, that Matteo would be here soon. They'd pre-registered, had a room waiting, and within an hour Serena was in a hospital bed with monitors beeping and contractions coming faster. Nico never left her side. He held her hand through every contraction, wiped her face with cool cloths, spoke encouragement when she was certain she couldn't continue. 14 hours of labor that felt like 14 years. And then finally, blessedly, the doctor was saying push, and she was pushing, and Nico was crying, and a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a boy," the doctor announced unnecessarily. "Congratulations." They placed Matteo on Serena's chest, tiny and perfect, and screaming his displeasure at the world. She looked down at her son, their son, and felt everything shift into sharp focus. This was why. All of it. The fear, the compromise, the violence, the impossible choices. This tiny human made everything worth it. He's perfect, Nico whispered, touching Matteo's impossibly small hand with one finger. You're perfect, both of you. Matteo quieted at his father's voice, turning his head toward the sound. Already recognizing, already connecting. Serena watched Nico fall completely in love with their son, watched transformation happen in real time as dangerous heir became devoted father. Matteo Blackwell Valente, she said softly. Welcome to the world, little one. We've been waiting for you. The first night was chaos. Nurses checking vitals, family arriving with flowers and noise, Matteo screaming every 2 hours for food. Antonio showed up with a stuffed lion the size of a small car and tears in his eyes when he held his grandson for the first time. Even Isabella came, bringing gifts and genuine happiness for their little family. But eventually, the visitors left. The nurses dimmed the lights, and it was just the three of them. Serena exhausted in the hospital bed, Nico in the chair beside her, with Matteo sleeping on his chest, the city lights glowing through the window. We did it, Serena said quietly. You did it. I just held your hand. No, we did it, together. Built this against impossible odds. Nico looked at her, then at the baby sleeping peacefully against his heart. I was so lost before you, going through motions, playing a role, waiting for life to actually start. Then I walked into a flower shop in a thunderstorm, and everything changed. That feels like a lifetime ago. It was. We're different people now. Better people? I'd like to think so. He adjusted Matteo carefully, and the baby made a small sound before settling again. This little guy deserves parents who choose love over fear, who build instead of destroy, who give him a chance at a real life. Think we can do that? I know we can. He reached for her hand with his free one, linking them together, husband, wife, and child. A family built from chaos and choice and stubborn hope. Because we've already survived the impossible. Everything from here is just details. Serena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion and joy in equal measure. In the morning, they'd go home to the brownstone. They'd figure out feeding schedules and diaper changes and how to function on no sleep. They'd navigate Nico's world and her needs and their son's future. But tonight, in this quiet hospital room, they were just a family. Imperfect, complicated, and absolutely real. And that was enough. The first 3 months with Matteo were a beautiful disaster. Sleep became a distant memory, a luxury from another lifetime. Serena learned to function on 90-minute increments, to shower with one ear always listening for cries, to eat meals standing up while rocking a fussy baby who seemed to think 3 a.m. was party time. Nico transformed into someone she barely recognized. The dangerous heir disappeared, replaced by a man who changed diapers with military efficiency, who sang off-key lullabies at 2 a.m, who cried the first time Matteo smiled at him. He rearranged his entire schedule around their son, taking meetings from home, delegating responsibilities, choosing fatherhood over empire building with a devotion that made Serena fall in love with him all over again. You're staring, Nico said one February morning, catching her watching him feed Matteo a bottle. Just memorizing this. You, him, this moment. Why? We have thousands of moments ahead. I know, but this is the beginning. When he's tiny enough to fit in one arm, when he still thinks you're the entire world. I want to remember it. Matteo finished the bottle and promptly spit up all over Nico's shoulder. Serena laughed as Nico grabbed a burp cloth with practiced ease. Glamorous, isn't it? He said wryly. The great Nico Valente, covered in baby vomit before breakfast. I think it's your best look yet. Liar. But he was smiling as he cleaned up, as he always smiled when Matteo was involved. Their son had that effect, turning the hardest man Serena knew into absolute putty. The tentative peace with the Russos held through winter. Marco kept his distance, focused on his own territory, and the promised truce became actual stability. Antonio, true to his word, had begun the slow process of legitimizing the family businesses. Contracts went to legal firms instead of being enforced through violence. Disputes got settled in boardrooms instead of back alleys. It was incremental, frustratingly slow, but it was real change. My father asked me to take over the shipping division, Nico mentioned one evening in March, while Matteo slept between them on the bed, tiny fists curled against his chest. Full control. Legal operations only. What did you say? That I'd think about it. It's what I've been pushing for. Legitimate business, real authority, a chance to build something clean. But it means more responsibility, longer hours, time away from you and Matteo. Serena touched their son's soft hair, marveling at how 3 months had passed in a blink. What do you want to do? I want both. Want to build the future we talked about and be present for every moment with him. Can't have it all, though. Something has to give. Not him. The words came out fierce. You don't get to miss his childhood because of business, legal or otherwise. I know. That's why I'm hesitating. Nico's hand covered hers on Matteo's head. My father missed everything. Every school play, every birthday, every moment that mattered. He was building an empire while I was growing up alone. I won't do that to Matteo. Then don't. Tell your father you'll take the shipping division, but with conditions. Reasonable hours, family time, boundaries. Antonio Valente doesn't do boundaries. Then maybe it's time he learned. Serena shifted to look at Nico directly. You're not him. You're building something different. That means making different choices. He was quiet for a long moment, studying their son's sleeping face. You make it sound simple. It is simple. It's just not easy. Nico took the shipping division with conditions that shocked everyone. No meetings before 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m., Sundays completely off, and full delegation authority to trusted lieutenants. Antonio argued, predicted failure, warned that showing weakness would invite challenges, but Nico held firm. And surprisingly, the sky didn't fall. The shipping operation thrived under his management. Contracts multiplied. Profits soared. And Nico made it home for dinner every night, made it to Matteo's pediatrician appointments, made it to the small moments that built a life. You're doing it, Serena said one April evening, watching him give Matteo a bath with intense concentration. Building something real. We're doing it, he corrected. This doesn't work without you. You keep me grounded. Keep me focused on what actually matters. Right now, what matters is that you're about to lose the baby soap in the drain. He caught it just in time, and Matteo giggled, an actual, genuine belly laugh that made them both freeze. Did he just... He laughed! Serena grabbed her phone. Do it again. Make him laugh again. Nico made a ridiculous face, and Matteo laughed harder, splashing water everywhere. They spent the next 20 minutes getting soaked, trying to capture that sound, that joy, that proof that their son was growing and changing and becoming his own little person. Later, after Matteo was asleep and they'd changed into dry clothes, Nico pulled Serena close on the couch. I have something to tell you about the flower shop. Her heart jumped. What about it? The lease is coming up for renewal. The landlord wants to sell the building. He offered it to me first. You want to buy my shop? I want to buy you your shop, put it in your name, give you the security of owning it outright. He pulled out papers from the side table. I already had the inspections done, got it appraised. It's a solid investment. Serena stared at the documents, emotions warring inside her. This is too much. It's not enough. You gave up so much to be with me. Your independence, your safety, your simple life. The least I can do is give you back the one thing that's always been yours. I didn't give anything up. I chose you, chose this life. Then let me choose this for you. Please. He pressed the papers into her hands. I know you've been thinking about reopening, about going back to work once Matteo's a bit older. This way, you have that option, on your terms. She looked at the deed, at her name printed in official letters. Serena Blackwell Valente, owner of Wildflower and Thorn. A piece of her old life secured for her future. Thank you, she whispered. This means everything. You mean everything. They made love that night with the tenderness of people who'd survived impossible odds and come out stronger. In the darkness, Serena traced the scar on Nico's jaw, the one that had been there that first rainy night, and marveled at how far they'd come from strangers buying roses to parents building a life. Summer arrived with Matteo's first tooth and Serena's decision to reopen the shop part-time. She hired an assistant, a young woman named Maya, who had her same passion for flowers and none of her complicated history, and started taking orders again. Just a few days a week, just a few hours at a time, but enough to remember who she'd been before Valente became her last name. Nico supported her completely, rearranged his schedule to be home with Matteo on her workdays, and showed up at closing time just like he had in those early months when everything was uncertain. Some things don't change, she said, watching him sweep the floor while she counted the register. Why mess with perfection? You think this is perfect? You sweeping my flower shop while our son drools on your expensive shirt at home? Absolutely perfect. He set down the broom and pulled her close. This is exactly where I want to be, with you, building our life, one day at a time. You've gotten sentimental in your old age. Fatherhood will do that to a man. He kissed her softly. That and loving you. The words still made her heart skip. She didn't think she'd ever get used to hearing them, to knowing this powerful, dangerous man had chosen her above all else. September brought Matteo's first birthday, and a celebration that was somehow both intimate and overwhelming. Antonio arrived with enough gifts to stock a toy store. Isabella came with her security chief, the relationship she'd hidden for years now openly acknowledged. Extended family filled the brownstone with noise and laughter and the chaos of people who'd accepted Serena as one of their own. Look at him, Nico said, watching Matteo destroy a birthday cake with enthusiastic messiness. A year ago, we were in the hospital. Now he's walking and babbling and developing opinions about everything. He gets that from you, the opinions part. Absolutely not. He gets his stubborn streak from you, his charm from you, his laugh from you, his eyes from you. They could have kept going, attributing every perfect piece of their son to each other. Instead, Serena leaned her head on Nico's shoulder and watched their baby boy, covered in frosting, surrounded by family, laughing with pure joy. We did good, she said softly. We did great. That night, after everyone left and Matteo was sleeping off his sugar high, Nico led Serena to the backyard. The space had transformed over the past year, from bare dirt to a garden that rivaled her shop. Roses climbed trellises, herbs grew in careful rows. A small fountain burbled peacefully in the corner. When did you do all this? She asked, amazed. Little by little. Weekends when you were at the shop, early mornings before Matteo woke up. I wanted you to have beauty here. Wanted our son to grow up with growing things. In the center of the garden stood something new, a stone bench with an inscription. For Serena, who builds beauty from chaos and taught me that love is the bravest choice. She traced the letters with shaking fingers. Nico, I know we're already married. I know we have a child and a life and all the legal paperwork. But I wanted to ask you again, properly this time. Not because my father demanded it or because circumstances forced our hand, but because I choose you, every day, forever. He knelt in the garden, in the space he'd built for her, and pulled out a second ring, different from his mother's elegant diamond. This one a band of intertwined platinum and gold. Serena Blackwell Valente, will you marry me again? Will you renew our vows and let me promise you forever with full intention this time? Will you build this life with me, raise our son together, and face whatever comes knowing we choose each other above everything? Tears streamed down her face. We're already married. I know, but I want you to say yes when there's no pressure, no threats, no fear, just us and this garden and the truth that I love you more than anything in this world. Yes, she whispered, 1,000 times yes. He slid the new ring onto her finger next to his mother's diamond and kissed her like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. They renewed their vows on a crisp October morning in the same garden where he'd proposed. Just immediate family this time, Antonio and Isabella, and a handful of people who mattered. Matteo toddled between them in a tiny suit, holding a pillow with rings he'd inevitably try to eat. The priest spoke words about love and choice and commitment, and this time when Serena promised forever, she meant it with every cell in her body. I love you, Nico said when the priest pronounced them married again. For everything you are and everything you've made me become. I love you, Serena replied, for showing up in a thunderstorm and choosing to stay. They kissed while Matteo giggled and clapped and their small gathered family celebrated the choice to choose each other again. It wasn't the dramatic cathedral wedding from before. It was better, honest and real and full of love that had been tested and proven. The years that followed were full of small miracles and everyday joys. Matteo grew into a bright, curious toddler who asked constant questions and had his father's intensity and his mother's kindness. The flower shop thrived, becoming known throughout the city for arrangements that spoke what words couldn't. The shipping business expanded into real estate, into investments, into ventures that were completely, proudly legitimate. Antonio stepped back gradually, letting Nico take more control, and seemed genuinely happy watching his grandson grow up with the childhood he'd never given his own son. The old man softened around the edges, spending Sundays at the brownstone teaching Matteo Italian and telling stories that were probably too violent for a toddler but captivated him completely. When Serena got pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one, Nico cried with the same wonder he'd shown with Matteo. Twin girls arrived the following spring, tiny and perfect and doubling the chaos overnight. 3 children, Serena said in exhausted amazement, staring at Sofia and Elena sleeping in their bassinets while Matteo napped between her and Nico on the bed. We have 3 children. We're officially outnumbered. This was your genetics. Boys don't run in my family. Are you blaming me for our beautiful daughters? Absolutely. But she was smiling, even through the exhaustion, even through the overwhelming reality of 3 children under 3. Nico pulled her close, careful not to wake their sleeping son. Remember when you thought this was impossible? When you tried to tear up that first ultrasound and hide from all of this? I remember being terrified. And now? Now I'm terrified in a completely different way, but also happier than I ever imagined possible. Good terrified or bad terrified? The best kind. The kind that means I have so much to lose, which means I have so much to love. He kissed her temple. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing this chaos. Too late for that. I'm all in now. They were all in together, building a life that was messy and beautiful and nothing like what either had planned. Nico continued transforming the family business, creating legitimate enterprises that employed hundreds and gave back to communities his father's generation had only exploited. Serena expanded the flower shop into a small chain, bringing beauty and meaning to neighborhoods that desperately needed both. The brownstone filled with laughter and tears, with skinned knees and first words, with family dinners where Antonio taught the children Italian curse words he definitely shouldn't, and Isabella brought gifts she definitely shouldn't have spent money on. The backyard garden grew wilder and more beautiful, becoming the children's favorite place to play, and Serena's refuge when the chaos got overwhelming. On their 5th wedding anniversary, or 7th, depending on whether you counted from the forced ceremony or the choice to renew, Nico surprised Serena with a trip to the hospital where Matteo was born. "Why are we here?" she asked, confused. "Come see." He led her to the maternity ward, to a new wing that hadn't existed before. The plaque beside the entrance read, "The Serena Valente Family Center, where every beginning matters." "You built a maternity ward?" "We built it. The Valente Foundation funded it, but it was your idea. You said once that you wished you'd had support when you found out about Matteo. People to talk to, resources, help navigating the fear. This gives that to women who need it." The center was beautiful. Private rooms, counseling services, support groups, everything a scared pregnant woman might need. Serena walked through it crying, touching walls, imagining the lives that would change here. "This is too much," she managed. "This is what we're supposed to do with power and money. Build things that matter. Help people who need it. Create the support system neither of us had." He pulled her close. "This is how we make our legacy something Matteo and the girls can be proud of." "I love you so much it hurts." "Good, because I love you the same way." They stood in the center named for her, in the building where their son had been born, and Serena understood with complete clarity that this was what love looked like. Not grand gestures or perfect moments, but choosing each other every day and building something that outlasted fear. The children grew. Matteo started kindergarten, reading above his level and asking questions that required Google to answer. Sofia and Elena developed distinct personalities. Sofia serious and thoughtful, Elena wild and fearless. They filled the brownstone with noise and energy and the beautiful chaos of childhood. Nico kept his promise about being present. He coached Matteo's soccer team, attended every recital and school play, knew all his children's friends and teachers by name. The dangerous air was still there. Serena saw flashes when business got complicated or someone threatened their family. But mostly, he was just dad. Patient, loving, devoted. Antonio passed away peacefully when Matteo was 7, surrounded by family, having lived long enough to see his son build something legitimate and his grandchildren grow up safe. At the funeral, Nico delivered a eulogy that was honest about his father's flaws, but grateful for his late-life transformation. "He made mistakes," Nico said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. "But he learned. He changed. He gave me space to build something better. That's his real legacy, not the empire, but the choice to let it evolve." Matteo held his father's hand through the entire service, 7 years old and already understanding that sometimes love means showing up even when it's hard. The flower shop became a neighborhood institution. People came to Serena for weddings and funerals, for apologies and celebrations, for moments when they needed beauty to speak what they couldn't. She knew her regulars by name, knew their stories, created arrangements that captured their exact feelings. One afternoon in late spring, a young man came in looking lost and soaked from unexpected rain. "I need flowers," he said. "I don't know what kind. Just something that says what I can't." Serena smiled, remembering another rainy day and another lost man. "Tell me about her." As she listened and created, as she built beauty from his broken words, she thought about the path that had brought her here. The ultrasound she'd torn to pieces, the wedding that wasn't, the threats and fear and impossible choices, and the love that had survived all of it. That evening, she closed the shop and walked home through streets that had become familiar and safe. The brownstone glowed with light, Nico visible through the window, helping Sofia with homework, while Elena and Matteo built something elaborate with blocks. Her family, her home, her impossible, beautiful life. She paused on the steps, taking a moment to appreciate it all, to remember how far they'd come from that first thunderstorm. Then she opened the door and walked into chaos, children shouting her name, Nico looking up with that smile that still made her heart skip, dinner burning slightly in the oven. "Welcome home," Nico said, kissing her while juggling a daughter on his hip. "Good to be home." And it was. After everything, the fear and the violence and the uncertain beginning, she was home. Not just in a building, but in this life they'd built together. In the family they'd created from accidental connection and stubborn hope. In the love that had transformed them both. That night, after the children were asleep, and the kitchen was clean, and the world was quiet, Serena and Nico stood in the backyard garden. The roses she'd planted 5 years ago climbed high now, full and fragrant. The fountain burbled its peaceful song. Moonlight turned everything silver. "Do you ever think about that night?" Nico asked, pulling her close. "The thunderstorm? The roses?" "All the time." "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." She turned in his arms to face him directly. "You asked me once if I believed in moments that change everything. I said no. Said life was just small decisions adding up. I remember. I was wrong. That moment changed everything. You changed everything." She touched his face, tracing the familiar lines she knew by heart. "You walked into my shop asking for roses, and you gave me the world. You gave me a reason to want the world. Before you, I was just going through motions. You made me want to be better, do better, build something real." "We built something real." "We did." He kissed her softly. "And we're going to keep building it, every day, for the rest of our lives." Above them, stars wheeled across the sky. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, the garden bloomed with life and promise. And in that moment, standing in the space they'd created together, Serena understood that love wasn't about perfect beginnings or fairy tale endings. It was about showing up every single day. Through thunderstorms and threats, through fear and joy, through every impossible moment. It was about choosing each other, again and again, until the choice became as natural as breathing. Nico still brought her red roses. Not every night, but often enough. Sometimes he'd arrive at closing time with a single stem, and that almost smile that had captured her heart from the beginning. And every time, without fail, he'd say the same words he'd said that very first night. "For tonight." Only now, there was no mystery, no secrets, no fear. Just a man who loved her completely. A family they'd built against impossible odds. A future stretching endlessly ahead, full of possibility and promise. "For tonight," Serena would reply, accepting the rose and the man and the life they'd created. and every night after. Because the woman who'd once tried to destroy proof of their beginning had learned something essential. Some things couldn't be destroyed. Some connections ran too deep. Some love was simply meant to be, even when it arrived in a thunderstorm carrying roses and questions about fate. She'd tried to tear it apart, to hide from it, to protect herself from the impossible complication of loving Nico Valente. Instead, it had become the foundation of everything. Not destiny, not obligation, not power or politics or careful negotiation, just a man who'd chosen to show up every single day, and a woman who'd finally let him stay. Forever.